Uh, Manish, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with everyone. It's early in the morning where I live, but I'm well caffeinated, and so I'm ready to go. So maybe what I'll do is in the first few minutes, let me tell you a little bit about myself and the background I have and the context I'm bringing to this conversation, just so you understand kind of how to contextualize what I'm talking about. I currently run product at a company called Grammarly. I spent many years at Google. I spent many of those years leading the Chrome and Chrome OS teams. And then later in my Google career, I led a cross-company team to focus on user trust. This includes things like privacy, security, safety. During my time at Google Chrome, we really scaled the product from nothing to a few 100 million monthly active users in 2011, which is a long time ago, to several billion users. Now, this graph is a bit misleading. It's very smoothed out. It's not always smooth and up and to the right. There's many bumps along the way that in the interest of aesthetics, we have not shown here. But it was very gratifying to be operating a product at that scale, having that much of an impact around the world. Grammarly, where I just recently moved just about a year ago, in fact, it's going to be my 1-year anniversary next week.
Oh,
is at a different scale.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. Different scale. But I'm super optimistic that we can actually operate at a very large scale as we build out the Grammarly product over the next several years. Grammarly, just very basically, is an AI-powered writing assistant. It helps you communicate more effectively and efficiently, something that's even more important now in a world of remote first and hybrid globalized work in a way that probably wasn't as true several years ago. So what I'm going to do for the next lightning round of 5 minutes is I'm going to distill down 25 years of hard-won, blood, sweat, and tear learned lessons in product management. I'm going to distill it down for you all so you can learn from my mistakes and the things that I have kind of experienced over the years. And I'm going to do it very briefly, and then I'm happy to discuss in more detail any one of these things in the Q&A time. Okay, so lesson number 1, measure what matters to your users. Now, this seems like a very obvious thing, but the way I would frame this is we as product managers are faced with a very noisy environment. There's a bunch of inputs coming in, there's business considerations, there's user feedback, there's competitive pressure, market dynamics. And so what ends up happening is it's a very human tendency to measure what's in front of you instead of actually measuring what matters. And I'll give you a very simple example of where I learned this lesson the hard way, which is we worked on this feature called Chrome autofill. You all may be familiar with this feature. You see a form on the web and Chrome autofills this feature. Now, the way we measured quality of this feature was we would look at the accuracy rates in every field on this form. So like, okay, did we fill in the first name field correctly, last name field correctly, et cetera. And our quality metrics look pretty good. They're like, oh, we're doing great. This feature is awesome. Except users would keep complaining about the feature and we couldn't understand it. We're like, look, it's just good. Our metrics tell us this feature is good, yet users are complaining about it. What gives? And one enterprising young product manager on our team figured out the problem. The problem we figured out was what really matters to users is peace of mind. And peace of mind implies getting everything right. So I don't have to go back and change anything manually. If I get even one thing wrong, any field wrong, I lose that peace of mind because I'm like, okay, hey Chrome, you got this wrong. What else did you get wrong in my form? I got to go check everything. So then the metric becomes, what percentage of the time do we get everything right? And when first of all, we realized we don't even measure that. So we didn't have a way to measure it. So we had to instrument the code to measure that. Once we measured it, it was pretty sobering. And I'll give you a thought exercise. If we are 90% correct on every field and there are 10 fields, the correctness rate, assuming independence, is 0.9 to the 10th power. It's a shockingly small number. So we learned the hard way what to measure. We got that measurement right, and then the quality of the feature improved substantially since then. So if you all are happy users of Chrome autofill, this is the reason that it happened. Lesson number 2. Understand your user's world. And what I mean by that is we all have implicit assumptions that we have baked in about how our product is being used in the wild by our users. But the reality is that context always changes. It changes either because our users' context is changing. Just think about all the disruptions caused by remote first work, people using the product and working in different ways. It also changes because we have new types of users coming in and using our product in ways that, and environments where we never anticipated it was going to be used. And it's really important to keep tabs on how our product is being used by different kinds of users, and really have your pulse on what's happening there, because it keeps changing. The way I learned this lesson, through experience is Chrome was already, this is about a decade ago, Chrome was already quite successful. I was running the team there. And this was when smartphone adoption was taking off in many parts of the world, including India. And we sort of just assumed that things were fine. Like we had a product, it was working well. There's a bunch of new users coming online in India. That's great. Like, let's celebrate that. However, our usage stats in India weren't looking that great. Like, the engagement was lower. Our share was lower, the other problems. And it took some folks on our team to really recognize that, let's understand how our product is being used in India. Like what's happening there? Like, is the context different? Is it the same? Like, well, let's understand what's going on. That deep dive really was eye-opening for us. For one thing, many devices on which Chrome was being used were entry-level Android devices, less memory footprint, less on-device storage. And Chrome just didn't perform well in those environments. I mean, we just assumed that there was unlimited memory and unlimited storage and all this stuff was just there. That was not the case. And so we just had baked that into our assumption. Another really interesting data point was, I still remember this, we were in a user's house doing a situational user research study. And we asked them to do a task. And we said, okay, why don't you open up Chrome and do something? So they open up Chrome, and they see this blank page with a box in it. And that was the design. You search for what you want on the web. And this person opened it up and saw this box, and they were just kind of puzzled by it. They're like, what is this thing? What they were telling the researcher was, oh, it looks like Chrome isn't working. I just see this box. I think let me kill it and start it again. At which point I was like, oh my God, this is such a disaster, because that's exactly the intended UI. And another implicit assumption we had baked in was everyone knew how to search on the web. Everyone already used computing in some capacity, and Chrome on a mobile device was just kind of an additional computing device. None of those assumptions were true in this new environment. And we learned that lesson the hard way. And we had to do a lot of things to change how the product operated to get that product to work well for these users in these new environments. So understand your user's context. It changes more often than you think. All right, lesson number 3, understand your users' pivotal journeys. Now, many of us understand how to think about user journeys. We talk about hero use cases, and there's a lot of literature on how to make sure that those hero use cases are optimized. This is not that. That's important. This pivotal journeys are something different. I just made up this term, by the way. I don't know if that's that term of art, but what I mean by this is these are things that users don't do very often in your product, but when they do it, it's really, really important to get it right. So think about situations in which you lose access to your account, or there's a payment decline, your credit card is expired, your password you can't access your password. These are the exception cases, but when it happens, the way you show up as a product can literally make the difference between a lifelong customer and churn. And so really, it's important to understand your users' pivotal journeys and show up in those moments and make sure you get it right. Now, during the beginning of the pandemic, one of the teams I was responsible for at Google before I left was the Google account team. It's a very widely used product. There's lots of Google accounts out there. And people have these challenges with their Google accounts. They get locked out, there's other problems, and there's a lot of valuable information in that account. So it's difficult for people. So we have a support team that manages if a user gets locked out, they can call the support team. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, we lost some of that support capacity. And so to fill that capacity, a bunch of really helpful engineers and product managers from our team said, you know what, we'll step up and we will provide support so our users don't suffer. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to see that. As they were doing the support, what they realized was, wow, this process is pretty clunky. It's not good for the support team. It's not good for users. There's too much back and forth. There's too much like duplicated information. Let's make it better. And they did. And it's so much, the support process is so much better now. It's a wonderful thing that helps millions of people every single day. Now, why did it take PMs and engineers getting involved in the support process for this to get better? It's because many of us, I think, are pre-wired or preconditioned to think of these pivotal journeys as exceptions, as something for customer support to handle, for ops to handle. But I would encourage us all to think about, how do we make sure the product understands what's happening to our users at these moments, and make sure that we can help show up, have the product show up in the right way with empathy for what the user is going through. It really is important. Lesson number 3. Lesson number 4, deliver moments of joy to your users. Now, look, I'm a user of many software products. We're not robots. We're not automatons. We're human beings. We have busy lives. We're stressed. We're doing a bunch of stuff. And so if your product can deliver just unexpected moment of joy, fulfillment, happiness, emotional connection, that is just a wonderful part of the overall product experience. When Chrome, in the early days of Chrome, we had this offline error page. So you couldn't connect to the internet. We would just show this error page. And we had this dyno, the Chrome dyno, just as an image on that page. And one day, I still remember this meeting. There's a product designer at this meeting saying, hey, this is kind of a crappy moment. This person was trying to connect to something and they couldn't. They failed in their task. So why don't we turn that moment of sadness into a moment of joy? And here's my idea. I'm going to show you this idea I have for this game, interactive dyno game. And we built it. It was awesome. And that thing, so first of all, it was just a wonderful thing. It was probably one of the most widely played games in the world. I think probably there's some lost productivity that I might be responsible for there. But really, from that moment on, every time I talk to any group of people about Chrome, like I talk at my kids' school about, like, hey, I work on Chrome. The first thing they would say to me was, oh, dyno game, I love it. It's so awesome. And so that created that moment of emotional connection with the product. And I think actually that's the thing that people remember way more than a bunch of other features that you're launching. At Grammarly, we have this weekly email we send out. Some of you may get this, where we just celebrate your progress in communication. Like, hey, you did great last week. You wrote these many words. You're doing awesome. You progressed from a year ago, and we're just kind of celebrating you in your journey. And these moments are really important because just recognize that your users need that emotional connection to your product. So think about how you can deliver these moments of joy. Okay, lesson number 5, and that's the end, is earn and strengthen your users' trust. And what I would say here, just kind of as kind of a framing, is technology is now more pervasive than ever before. It's in every aspect of our lives in ways that even I, as a technologist, could not have fathomed a decade ago. Like just the other day, I was trying to grant access to my vacuum cleaner, from my smartphone through an app. They're going to connect accounts. Craziness. Like what? Like, do I grant access? What data is being collected? Where's the data going? I have no way to reason about what is happening, how data is being joined together. And I'm pretty tech savvy. And so just recognize that we have foisted as technologists. I'm a huge fan of technology. I'm a technology optimist, but we should all recognize that the pace of change that technology has driven in people's lives is very, very fast. It's faster than people's capacity to absorb that change. So it's on us. It's our responsibility to do it in a way that strengthens user trust, not erodes it. There's a very nice user trust equation created by this professor from the Harvard Business School. Manish, you and I went to Stanford Business School, so this might be.
I was just gonna say. I mean, I'm kidding. I wasn't gonna say anything.
So let's just set that aside. Let's set that aside. But the simple way to think about it is, There are three things that help trust. Credibility, which is how competent are you? Like, it's all very well to have virtue signaling statements, but are you actually competent? That's what credibility is. Reliability is, do you have a brand promise? And can you reliably follow through on that brand promise? If your brand promise is we have the best quality, can you reliably deliver on that brand promise? If your brand promise is best customer service, fastest, whatever it might be, make sure that people can count on you to deliver on that thing. Intimacy is about emotional connection. It's not just about keeping people safe. It's about make people feeling that they're safe when they're using your product. And can you create that sense of intimacy and safety? And then what erodes trust is the degree to which your incentives deviate from your users' incentives. It doesn't always align 100%. Just recognize that reality of your business model and your users' incentives, and just recognize that any deviation is going to result in an erosion of user trust. And just be very cognizant of it, engage in the conversation with your users, and bake that into how you build your product. So that's it. Measure what matters, understand user context, understand pivotal journeys, moments of joy. We're not robots, and user trust is super important. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and happy to answer questions or get any feedback.
This is incredible, Rahul. I mean, I can relate to this just because I know you for a while and have tracked your career decisions. This is really, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years of learnings crystallized in really 5 or 7 minutes. We could frankly just go on each one of those slides, and there could be an hour-long or 2-hour-long active discussion. But no, thank you so much for sharing it so succinctly and effectively. In fact, by the way, on the Harvard Business School, I was just going to say that they've had their share of glory here or there, as we've had ours. But I'm actually personally also a fan of this trust framework. I've read a little bit about it. You've actually put it into action in Chrome and other products you've been part of. It's great. It's great that you quoted that. Rahul, if it's okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna just dive into maybe some themes that come out of these 5 very simple sounding but very deep lessons.
Yeah.
And then some from your own journey. And I'm also trying to link it back to the theme for the summit, which is RevItUp. That's around building value in products, effectively building value in businesses, not valuations. Those cycles come and go, as we know. And also as product managers think about building their own, how do they scale their own dimensions as a product that's serving maybe 100,000 users to something that may serve 50 million, 100 million, or if they're lucky, something like a billion or many billions like you've been a part of. So with that in mind, I'll actually just ask straight away first, when you look at product management, what comes to your mind first? Is it more of an art? Is it more of a science?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I'll say the essence of product management to me, people are like, what is a product manager? It's lots of definitions. My view is the essence of product management is you put the user in the middle and you deeply understand user needs. It's that simple. Like, it's easy to get caught up in a lot of complexity around like, what is the competitor landscape? What are other people doing? How do I survive in this world? Like, what is the business model, etc. But ultimately, you've really got to be super, super clear as a product manager, what problem you are solving for users. You got to make sure it's a problem the users care about. You can solve a problem that they don't care about, and that's not going to work out well. So you got to make sure you're solving a problem they care about. And so I think it's art and science. So like user centricity is the key thing. And user centricity is one of those things where it seems like an obvious thing, like, of course, user centricity, but in my experience, often we can deviate from it because we get caught up in all sorts of other considerations. And like really keeping that framework of like, is it the right thing for the user is a very simple framework to always remind yourself to simplify decision-making. There's science and art. I think there's science in the sense that look, they're well-defined processes we should follow. Like we should understand, product health metrics. We should have a way of collecting feedback, aggregating feedback. And so there's science to understanding how is the product doing, what are we measuring in the product, what is the process of value creation. But it's not just science, it is art. At the end of the day, I think what the key to success is you're solving an important problem that users care about. That's one piece of it. And second piece of it is you have some unique, differentiated way that is not easy to copy in delivering that solution. So that you build something, it's solving the problem, that's awesome. But you know what? There's really no kind of moat or differentiation or core capability that you bring that just can't be easily replicated elsewhere. And so then that success is very tenuous, could change at any time. And so the first question is, what is the problem we're solving? The second question is, why should we be the ones solving it? What is the thing that we bring to the table? And you got to be very honest about it. Like this can't be, these are moments of sometimes scary recognition of our own capabilities and what we do well and what we don't do well. And it's important to be super honest about what we can and cannot do.
Amazing. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as scale product management teams are built, as a leader, you would have to think about bringing both kinds of skills and thinking to the table. Very interesting. I want to actually talk about the Dino game. In fact, it was one of my my older daughter who you have met. She pointed me to the Dino game, and it certainly brought tons of joy to many Chrome users. If I dare say, it's been used more than games that consumers have otherwise paid hundreds of dollars for, or even more. Clearly a very interesting idea. But look, we've got the benefit of hindsight there. The question that keeping the Dino game and that concept of bringing joy to users at the core of it, as a product management lead, I mean, you must be getting hundreds of ideas. I mean, go back to your time at Chrome. How do you, I mean, you can't iterate, you can't do A/B testing on everything. You can't, accept everything. There's almost like a venture capital or whatever the model is of top of the funnel to then, selecting some ideas. How do you select what to experiment with and what to reject?
So there are a couple of things. One is, at Chrome, by the time I left, was a very large team. And so there's many teams globally distributed, et cetera. And so as you scale up, you want to make sure that people feel a lot of autonomy. I was in the position of leading the team. And so we hired very smart people in. And so the last thing you want to do is hire smart people in and then just kind of be super prescriptive on everything they should be working on. So one thing that I try to do as a leader is to just have us point in the same direction. Let's all agree on the biggest problems that we want to solve as an overall team for the next 12 to 18 months. And then everyone can kind of figure out like, what are they going to contribute to solving that problem? So a good example is, all right, so Chrome, as I mentioned, Chrome did not work well in the early days on these entry-level mobile devices. We need to solve that problem. Why is that problem important? We kind of did the analysis to say, look, this is a massively fast-growing environment. We expect a couple of years from now, billions of people will be using Chrome on these devices. We got to fix it. Now, this is not just any one team fixing it. Everyone needs to jump in and to contribute, from how the memory management team, from the UI team, dealing with like, okay, how do we deal with the blank search box, et cetera. So we kind of agree on the problem, and then every team goes and solves what they can to make progress on that problem statement. And my role there is just to encourage people, to unblock them, but not to sit there and bug people on like, do this thing and don't do this other thing. That's part of it. The other part of it, to be honest, is there's a certain amount of creativity and cool ideas, and you want to just build in some place in your org for just sort of unconstrained innovation to take place. Everyone has different things. In Chrome, we used to do hack weeks every so often. People would just come together, a couple of weeks, just come up with cool ideas. We'd have contests, just make it fun. At Grammarly, there was a similar thing in place already before I joined, which is great. I think you need some innovation outlet. And when you see good ideas, just say yes. Don't get in the way. Just let that innovation flourish.
Very interesting.
That's the case of the Dino game. I can take zero credit for it.
But
Someone
it just,
came up with a really cool idea, and I just did not get in the way. That's the extent of my
but it
involvement.
clicked for you in that very
Yeah,
instant.
yeah.
It did. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's stick to Chrome for another minute or two. Clearly, again, with hindsight, one can, like you said, the smoothening of the curve that you showed earlier in your presentation. Life is never as smooth as sometimes pictures and graphs show us.
Yeah.
What are like one or two, could be challenging or could be on the upside kind of pivotal moments? And I'm sure there are many, but if you had to pick like the top two in what has made or helped Chrome become what it has become, dominant market leader, what would those be, Rahul? Just walk us through that.
Yeah. The source of all my gray hair. One of them is the rise of mobile. So even before Android, entry-level Android devices, etc., smartphones were taking off in the US or globally with the launch of the iPhone. Chrome at that point had already been quite a successful desktop product. We had got a big share of desktop browser market. And when mobile came, in retrospect, the way we saw mobile was it's just an operating system port. Essentially the way, I'm oversimplifying it, but the way I think we took it was to say, all right, we've got Chrome on Mac and Windows. I guess now we need to build Chrome for iOS and Android. We'll just do it. Just like we do Mac and Windows, we'll just build Chrome for new operating systems. I think we failed to understand the fact that mobile was a fundamentally different computing model and computing paradigm. And it took us a while to really understand that. So that was an existential moment where the mobile web was really struggling. There was a very famous Mark Zuckerberg moment, which many of you may not remember. It happened a long time ago, where he basically said, I'm done with the mobile web. I'm all in on apps. And so I was in the Chrome team at the time saying, oh my God, what is happening? And so we really struggled with that. We couldn't understand what was wrong on mobile. It really took a lot of humility and took a lot of we had to really go back and rethink the experience from the ground up to make it work on mobile. And there's many interesting stories about how we did it, but it took us a while to get that right. So I would say that was kind of a big moment of truth for us. And we almost never made it out the other end. And then another interesting moment, this is a little more sensitive, so I'll be careful what I say here, but with more recently, when Windows started investing a lot more, Microsoft started investing a lot more in the mobile web, there was definitely some challenges with, we had a bunch of users on Windows. Microsoft had just launched a new browser called Edge. And they were doing these flows that made it hard for Chrome users. They would get an operating system update, and suddenly Edge would become their default browser, and they'd be like, what just happened? I used to use Chrome and now I'm using Edge. And so all these shenanigans were happening, and that was challenging. And I think, there was a lot of discussions about like, how do we respond to this? And actually, honestly, I remember being in these very complicated meetings, lots of game theory happening. We do this, Microsoft does this. It really comes down to what is the right thing for the user. We're dealing with mind-numbingly complex trade-offs. And the way I made decisions there was, let's just make sure that the user experience is great. And let's not worry about, we don't want users to be dealing with Google and Microsoft doing some strategic face-off like that. Users should not be caught in the middle of that thing. And that really helped guide me through it. And we came out the other end. I think we're doing pretty well. My information's a bit dated now, but I think it's doing pretty well.
But it's still easier said than done, right? I mean, as you said, these are fairly complicated, multi-dimensional problems, especially when it's competitive behavior of another behemoth against yours.
Yeah.
And as startup founders think about it, they have to actually think about the 800-pound gorilla's moves, that could potentially kill their product or the need for it, and so on. So interesting. Keep the user at the core and center of it. And then a lot of the answers become obvious and easy. Interesting. I want to stay on one of your other themes. I think it was lesson number 3. But the question related to that is, how do you get like personal biases, team biases out of the whole product management journey and experience? Because ultimately it's humans that are in there. So again, it's easy to say, look, I'll listen to the user and make it all work for the user, but the humans on the other end to making decisions. Any nuggets for our audience on how you've managed to keep biases out of this?
Yeah, it's very hard to completely eliminate bias. There's always going to be unconscious bias. And so you just have to be very vigilant. One of the things that really helps is just diverse teams. I'm a big proponent in the US. There's a DEI, many companies do DEI efforts. I'm a big fan of it. Building products that touch a wide variety of users, having a team with the diversity of backgrounds, experiences really helps. And I would encourage everyone in whatever context. Diversity comes in many different forms. And so it could be racial, gender, ethnic. It would also be just life experiences. And so I would just encourage you to make sure that you don't create a monoculture where everyone is a kind of a mirror image of you. And you all come from the same background and have the same experiences, because you're going to be very blind to a lot of things as you scale your product. So that's one thing. I think everyone should be thinking about that. Another one is just be humble. Like, I think be very open to user feedback. Like really make it a point to understand what users are seeing and what they're saying about your product. If you're not hearing from your users about your product, that also is a problem. Find ways to hear. Like maybe the lesson is, oh yeah, we have no idea what's happening. So let's build in some in-product feedback, and let's make sure we have some channels, and let's make sure we are looking at that feedback. And if you're operating at some scale, sometimes the feedback loop between customer success or customer support, or even social channel managers and product can get a little bit diffuse. Like, there's more product managers, where does the feedback go, etc. And so the product team needs to be laser focused on hearing what's coming from those teams, and doing it with an open spirit. Like maybe one of the other suggestions I would have is, sometimes people can get a little defensive about these things. I've built this thing, it's perfect, it's my baby. It's like, there's nothing could possibly be wrong with it. And then you hear user feedback and it's not exactly what you expected. That's okay. Just be humble. Users ultimately will guide us in the right direction, and we got to be open to it.
Interesting. Super interesting. Cool. I'm also keeping an eye on time as well as some Q&A, and then the team is also getting fed with questions from founders separately. So I want to make sure that I cover at least the breadth of questions that is coming in.
Yeah.
One question which I had also, and this has been asked, is just, I think people are trying to understand your own journey of learning and unlearning. And, since again, one of the conference themes is how do founders scale and, learn along the way of scaling their products and businesses. Is that, look, Google, of course, tech giant, Chrome, dominant market share, I don't know, 60, 70%, I don't know, dominant market share, let's just leave it there. Billions of users, and you'd seen the journey from start to that, point of scale, to Grammarly, which is a very interesting product. Off the bat, it's about solving for, it is just a product that empathizes with users, day one, right? Somebody who's wants to get better with language and the impact and communication of that language and so on. But it's still at a very different scale. It's, I don't know, tens of millions of users. What kind of unlearning and new learnings are you have gone through in the last year or so as you navigate this next phase in your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I joined Grammarly about a year ago. The reason I joined was the mission of the company really resonated with me. One of the things I've always done in my career is I'm not a founder, so I try to find in places where the problem statement that we're attacking is something that I care deeply about. Like in the early days of Chrome, for example, it was a skunkworks project inside Google, and people thought we were crazy. It was not like one of those things that people said, "Oh, what a great idea." People are like, "What? Well, you guys are nuts." And frankly, they might have been correct. But what I loved was I loved the idea of making the web platform better. And that mission really resonated with me. And I just took a leap of faith. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be successful or not, but I would like to bring that future about. I felt the same way about Grammarly. Grammarly is looking to scale, but it's much earlier in its evolution. But the mission really resonates with me. And if I project out 5 to 10 years and I imagine a future world in which billions of people around the world are communicating more effectively with each other, with reduced anxiety, with greater understanding, I feel like that's a world that I want to bring about. And I want to be part of that journey. And so that's why I joined the company, and we're going to embark on that journey. And my sense is, if you get like-minded people with the same sense of shared mission, you kind of have a much better shot at bucking the odds and actually bringing that about. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If enough people believe, it kind of just becomes the truth. So that's the intent at Grammarly. I think, it's an earlier stage company. And so I think the key thing is we just got to pace ourselves. It's a very large opportunity space for us. There's so many different ways in which people communicate. They communicate in different mediums, video and voice, in different languages. And if Grammarly were to just go after the entirety of the opportunity at one fell swoop, just because like it's so exciting, we should do everything, I think it would be difficult from a product strategy perspective to actually build defensible, useful products that solve user needs at every step of the way. So you really want to take a user problem, solve it end to end, be confident that you've nailed it, move on to the next user problem, and slowly expand from a very secure foundation. And so I think one of the things is we're just going to pace ourselves and not try to just spread ourselves too thin, because we're a smaller team. Second is, it's not like I want to just have a one size fits all solution. Like in Chrome, we used to have a certain set of processes because we are a very large global team. At Grammarly, we are global, but we're much smaller. So, like some of the stuff we did that was appropriate for a much larger team is not appropriate here. So you got to just check the process is not the end. The process is just a means to operating with more transparency. So if something is not needed, let's not do it.
Oh, very interesting. And by the way, you quoted in slightly different words, a very famous dialogue from Shah Rukh Khan as well, right? And there's a lot of audience that relates to Bollywood too. So I think that would resonate quite well. Rahul, a question more, I think a question that is being asked is probably their younger product or a younger business. What advice would you have for them in terms of not making critical mistakes early as they're thinking about building a scalable product?
I think, I think it's really important to so let's back up. I think it's really important as product managers to have a very clear sense of what problem you're solving and to be convinced that you actually have an effective way to solve that problem that is differentiated, unique, and is actually solving this problem well. It sounds like a very easy thing, but often, what I find is people build something and they haven't mapped backwards from a user problem. They just build something and then they're like, all right, how do I take this to market? And if you actually map it to a user problem, you find it's not really solving the entire user problem. It's solving a part of the user problem, but users need to plug and play a bunch of other things to solve the problem. And it doesn't kind of fit into how users actually do work, whether it's enterprise or consumer. So the best advice I have is really start with the user, understand the problem, and also be very honest with yourself about how important that problem is. And you just got to recognize that some problems might be nice, but it doesn't matter that much. Like, the best alternative solution, which may not even be a technology solution, is reasonable. It's fine. And so I see a lot of blind alleyways because that discipline doesn't get applied up front. So I would say, as much as possible, front load that process. Don't spring into action without having a very clear sense of the strategy.
Interesting. Rahul, I'm sensitive of time. This is the last question, and I
Yeah.
promise to free you up before your busy day starts, and we had you start very early. This is more, this is coming from me, and I know, look, currently there's just so much going on, right? We live in a fairly volatile world, and I know you Grammarly is like also affected by the whole Ukraine situation, right? I think you have some workforce and folks that are working with Grammarly there. We don't know what's going to come out of that. And then, of course, the whole volatility around tech markets, public markets, and whatever effect it has on private markets as well, and so on. What worries you today, like the most, as you think about let's just put Grammarly's context to build something really impactful, sustainable, large scale, sort of like Chrome. What worries you when you go to bed, when you think about that mission on one hand, and then things that you don't control? And how do you sort of get your peace with it also?
I mean, we are living this in real time. We have a large team based out of Kyiv, which was our previous hub. The founders came out of Ukraine, even though they don't live there now. And so over the last few months, actually, it's been quite difficult at work because we're trying to help our colleagues who are in harm's way. It's crazy. I mean, it's just amazing to see the resilience, but it's also very difficult. Many of our colleagues are in a difficult situation. I think at moments like these test whether you as a company and what you have built will shatter under pressure or come together stronger. And what's been really amazing to me at Grammarly is over the last couple of months, things have been very, very difficult. We've lost a bunch of capacity. We have, just at a personal level, people we care about in harm's way, struggling. And people have just come together. It's truly inspiring to see how everyone has come together to want to help. And it's not based on fear of the unknown or fear of the future. It's based on, I really care about this team. I care about this mission. I care about my teammates. What can I do to help? That, and this, I can't take any credit for this. This is Grammarly's culture that attracted me to the company as well. That to me is the most positive sign of our long-term success, is that we actually didn't shatter under pressure. We became stronger under pressure. I am super focused on the long term. There's challenges. I mean, if I just look at the world around us, there's increased polarization. There's increased kind of, there's a retreat of globalization, if you will. And there seems to be more parochial kind of territorial tendencies. Russian aggression is one thing, but there's many other examples of this. There's also global warming. And so there's just a whole host of just difficult problems in the world that we can't control. I think what we can control is building a culture in which people feel supported and strengthened when they see this pressure around them versus get pulled apart. And if that's our contribution, I think it's a very positive contribution. And I'm super focused on the long term. I think we'll come out of this stronger. I think the tech world will come out of this stronger. And we want to just keep building tech to help people in their daily lives.
That's amazing. Amazing to hear that optimism from you, especially when your teams and the company is quite directly impacted by this, as are many other companies. Rahul, this has been fascinating. I mean, look, for me, it's catching up with you is always great, but to do it in this format, where the focus is on the audience, product managers and product builders, it's great to see all your experience getting crystallized, as I said earlier, in this short 45-minute time frame. Sorry for having very targeted questions, but we wanted to get the most from you in this time. I really hope, I certainly enjoyed it. I hope it was good use of your time, and I hope the audience enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll get you back. Maybe we'll have to pick like 5 separate sessions for each of the lessons that you shared. And that may not be enough.
Sounds good. Hey, listen, Manish, it was great. Really enjoyed being here. Thank you for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. On behalf of the whole WaterBridge team and the audience, our founder partners, and everybody else, thank you very much for your time. You take care.
Take care.
Have a good day.
See
Take
you,
care,
everyone.
Rahul. Thanks
See
a
you,
lot.
Manish. Bye.
Bye.